More often than not, I have a really hard time picking out an outfit, but Armoire makes getting dressed super easy. With a clothing rental membership from Armoire, build the perfect wardrobe with brands that are high quality, unique, and recommended just for you. All you have to do is take a 5-minute style quiz and select items from your dynamic, personalized closet. The styles show up at your door in as little as 2 days. Then when you're ready for new clothes, just swap them out for more new-to-you styles. I'm currently on this dress kick, but not just any dress, dresses with cutouts. And I was so excited to find quite a few on Armoire that I'm able to rotate between beach outings, brunches, and of course, walking my dog in style. Right now, for our listeners, you can give Armoire a try and get up to 50% off your first month. That's up to $125 off. Just visit armoire.style/dateable. That is armoire.style, spelled ARMOIRE.style/DATEABLE, and get up to 50% off your first month. And never worry about what to wear again. Try Armoire today.
I don't know about you, but I always struggle with cravings and bloating that time of month and just feel a little off when I get my period. This is something that's been a challenge for me for a very long time, and I recently started taking Hormone Harmony to manage my PMS, and it really supports my hormonal balance and regulation. I feel like since I've been using it, my sleep quality has improved, and it's relieved some of my mood swings. And the biggest benefit, feeling like myself again. That's what women mention over and over in their reviews. And there are 17,000 reviews for Hormone Harmony. Women cannot stop talking about it on social media. Literally, a bottle of Hormone Harmony is sold every 24 seconds. Happy Mammoth, the company that created Hormone Harmony, is dedicated to making women's lives easier. It has 0 sugar and it's gluten-free, dairy-free, non-GMO, and third-party tested. For a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use the code DATEABLE at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code DATEABLE for 15% off today.
Hi, I'm Yue Xu.
And I'm Julie Krafchick.
We're active daters turned dating insiders.
Here to dive into everything modern dating and relationships.
Welcome to Dateable. Hello, friends.
Welcome back to another episode of Dateable.
We are always happy to be back and to, I want to say, see your faces, but that sounds creepy because we can't see your faces. But to know that you're here with us, I feel your energy with us.
You're always here with us. In our hearts, you are always here with us.
Yes, forever in our hearts. I don't know about you or anybody else, but I use a lot of zit stickers, like, the stickers that you put on zits, like you put them on overnight, but I got heart-shaped ones.
Oh,
they're really cute. They're pink and they're heart-shaped, but by the time I wake up in the morning, they end up in all kinds of random places. Like I must scratch my face or something in the middle of the night. And I kind of love it because the next day I find random little hearts like on my pajamas or on my pillow. So you're all like that. You're all like the heart zit stickers.
Oh,
you're
God.
with us. In all the random places.
I think you should take a photo and put it on Instagram of you with your zit stickers, your heart stick.
You want that?
Yeah, I
okay.
do.
I'm on my last heart zit sticker.
Oh, gotta get on it then.
I'm gonna get on it. And I happen to have one zit right now. So perfect.
Lovely. Lovely. Like, how do we even transition into that?
No, it's about love and hearts. And that's what we're going to talk about today because every episode is about love and hearts and expanding our heart and expanding our love, right?
I mean, this is a really good one. This is someone that we've wanted to get for a long time on our podcast. We actually did a call out on a past episode that we'll link in the show notes that was called The Truth About Relationships, because we had quoted Todd Barrett so many times from his Instagram posts that really just are like such a no-nonsense approach to relationships that I personally find really refreshing.
And you might already follow him on Instagram. His handle is @YourDiagNonsense. He is a renowned psychotherapist, sex therapist, and an eHarmony sex and relationship expert. And he's the author of the book, How to Love Someone Without Losing Your Fucking Mind. Fucking is not part of the title, but it just feels like it needs to be.
It really does. I think this episode is for anyone that wants that raw and real, non-sugar-coated look into dating and relationships, because Todd gives it to you.
Yeah, and Todd is very much about, he gives the advice, but then he can also be very real about how hard it is to follow the advice.
Yes.
So you'll also hear this like unfiltered story of just him dealing with a past relationship.
Yeah. And I mean, I think just his content in general, and then this episode, it just makes me personally feel validated in a lot of the things that are happening. Like he breaks down the maybe not as glamorous sides of relationships, of how you might find your partner annoying from time to time and be frustrated and even be heartbroken from time to time and disappointed. And I think for anyone that wants, again, that raw and real aspect of relationships and feel validated, this episode is going to give you that.
And even if you're not in a relationship, you're probably thinking, gosh, dating, it drives me crazy. Trying to understand people drives me crazy. Todd gives you great advice and tips on how to not lose your mind, which is part of the title of his book. But because it's such a real look at whatever you feel conflicted about, it's so normal that it's okay. Like, it's okay if you are struggling.
Yeah. He also does say that the title is a little bit of a bait and switch and you will lose your mind in love. Do you remember he says that? So I think he also validates that that's okay. And I think, if you're dating and not in a long-term relationship, this episode is actually even more important in a way. Okay, I don't want to say more. It's equally as important. But because it sets the reality of what a relationship is, I had this feeling, I think because I had never been in like as day-to-day life partner type relationship as I'm in now. I had this like fantasy almost like once I find the person, it'll all be easy. And like there won't be all these like little things that come up. Like I was thinking like big conflict, not like just little annoyances and things that happen. And not just on my side, but my partner will feel too towards me a lot of times. And I think Todd really sets the expectations. So when this stuff comes up, you're not like, shit, I gotta bounce. Because I think that is like a huge problem in today's dating culture and relationships, is that we think, the next person there won't be these issues with. But the truth is, and Dr. Alexandra Sullivan said this in an episode years ago that we did, and it's stuck with me ever since. Conflict is inevitable and you will find it with whoever you date.
Absolutely. And he's going to help answer this question, a big question, which is like, what is normal to have in a relationship and what's not? What is a deal breaker? What is a red flag? Many of us in new relationships, especially if you haven't come from a bunch of relationships, you start thinking like, is this normal? Like, is this right? Is this the wrong person for me? We sure have a friend. You know exactly who you are. We won't call you out, but you know who you are, who is constantly dealing with this. Like, is this just not the right person for me? Todd will help put a framework around that so you can have more clarity around how do you navigate that new relationship.
I think the biggest aha moment in this episode for me was just how he looks at evaluating partners. Like, we're always like, did they meet my need? Did they do this? And he was like, none of that's right. Like, that's not how you do it. And it's not always should you stay or should you go? There are other options. And that reframing is so huge. And I think worth the listen in itself.
Ooh, that's a good setup. Good
it
job,
is.
Julie. It's a very good setup. Makes me want to re-listen.
Yeah. Before we go into it, though, we actually, because Todd is a sex and relationship expert for eHarmony, their team over there was so wonderful to provide us with actually their recent eHarmony report of dating trends. And there were some really interesting stats in there that I thought would be fun to share on the intro before we get into it with Todd. So I guess the first one, might as well just go into it. Gen Z's number one dating goal for 2024 is to find a long-term relationship, which is 49% of people, and date intentionally, 47%.
Surprising stat for me. I didn't think Gen Z cared about long-term relationships at all, but okay, proving me wrong.
I mean, I think it's like one of those things that you hear and you're just like, oh, of course. But I think that the key is Gen Z because they're all like 20s is like the high end of Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like when I was in that stage, that was not my number one intention. So I think there's like this feeling that Gen Z is a bit more like old soul. And I think this correlates to that.
True. And then contrary to that, millennials are prioritizing strong relationships, with 49% wanting a healthier relationship in 2024. So I guess millennials are like, okay, been through the wanting long-term relationship route. That's not all I'm looking for. I not just want a long-term relationship. I want a strong relationship with a strong connection.
Well, I think that is so wise because we always hear this too. It's like, do they want a relationship? That's what I want to find out. And it's like, it almost doesn't matter. If they're like, I just want to hook up and don't want to be committed at all. Sure, that's different. But what a relationship looks like, how it operates, what it means is so different. Like when I look back at things that I thought were relationships, I'm like, no, it wasn't.
No.
But at the time, I thought it was, so healthier. I like that.
Right.
Okay. And then another one was Gen Z singles believe that past heartbreaks have made them more cautious about relationships. And 72% say it made them less trusting in relationships.
72%. Damn.
I mean, heartbreak can do that number on you. I think that's why it's really important to do the necessary healing work after heartbreak, because what we don't want to happen is, I think heartbreak is inevitable, but we don't want people to feel jaded when things don't work out and it get in the way of finding that right relationship for them.
Yeah. And also Gen Z, this is probably their first time really experiencing major heartbreaks. And it does hurt so much more
the first
couple times. But by the time you get to an elder millennial, you're like, just another heartbreak.
But I do think it like wears down on you in a different way then, because it's been like so much, of these cuts.
Yeah. Yes. Not to minimize any of that. Gen Z's top reasons for breakups include lack of communication. 48% said that. 39% said growing apart, and then 33% said infidelity/cheating.
Interesting. I mean, there are stats like with cheating, right? That like younger, that happens more.
Really? Okay.
It's not all inclusive, certainly, but I don't know. I could be wrong on that. I thought I read something like that.
The lack of communication as the number one reason for breakups is astounding to me. What does that mean? Is it like ghosting? Is that what this means?
I don't know. Again, the communication is such a broad word. I would look at it like one person wants one thing, another one wants another, and they don't have the skills to actually communicate their needs to one another. That's how I would probably interpret it. Like one person thinks it's more serious, one person doesn't, or they said they would go out next week and they're partying with their friends and said, I don't know, does Gen Z party? Maybe not. Maybe that's not an issue anymore.
Right.
But yeah.
That's what I thought growing apart would be more of the top reason. I mean, it is the second reason, so it's still prominent. But I mean, in my 20s, it's like every relationship broke up because there's so many life changes.
Yeah.
You want to pursue so many different experiences.
It's hard to know. Again, I'd love to get a more breakdown on communication, but I do think that a lot of times in younger, less matured relationships, it's really hard to, one, even identify your needs, yet alone state them.
Yeah.
And then the last stat, the top quality Gen Z is looking for in a partner. What do you think it is, Yue?
Well, I see the answers in front of me, so I'm going to pretend I didn't see them. I'm going to guess even before reading the answers, I'm going to guess that physical attraction is not top of this list.
Well, you're right. Emotional intelligence, 28%, and then humor, 23%. I think emotional intelligence makes sense in the world that we're in. I feel like there's we hear this all the time. I'm a little surprised because it's like a younger demographic, but we hear this in our communities all the time of just like, I want someone with EQ, emotional intelligence.
I wouldn't have known what that meant in my 20s.
The therapy generation though, right?
Oh, you're right. But I'm also equally as surprised by humor still being a top quality that people look
just
for.
Never going to go away, I guess.
It's such a throwaway answer. Like, humor is so relative. Also, it's kind of a given. Like, of course, I don't know.
So here's my gripe with these, and this is actually kind of a tie-in to our book, How to Be Dateable, which is coming out in January. But I think there needs to be like layers deeper with all of them. Like emotional intelligence to me is such a buzzword. Humor, such a buzzword. What does that actually mean? So if you're just going around being like, I'm looking for emotional intelligence or I'm looking for humor, like where do you even start? I think you need to get way more specific on that of what that means to you. Anyways, we break it down. That is something that we definitely really focus on of getting clarity and where you're going with dating in our book, How to Be Dateable. So plug to do the pre-ordering if you haven't yet. All major retailers, howtobedateable.com. We've said it, but pre-orders mean all the world to us. It really helps make this book a success. We were so over the moon to get picked up on a most anticipated list
by Ms. Zibby Owens herself. She publishes books as well, but she's a major book influencer. I mean, there's just so many people who are very much impacted by the books that she picks on her list. And we were so surprised to be on her list as one of the few non-fiction picks as most anticipated for winter fall. Very exciting because we're not coming out till January. So I'm so happy that she found us and put us on her list.
We're author noobs, as you know, first time authors. So another reason why all the pre-orders make so much of a difference. But we were just like, oh, we got this email. And like our agents and publishers were just like, this is a big deal, guys. So deal. We were like, okay, it's cool.
A very big deal.
Cool. We were invited to the party. There was a party for all the people that got mentioned.
We might still go. We're keeping the door.
I was like, I'm going to be in Italy, so maybe you can go.
We're keeping the
but
door
we'd like to go to
open
future ones
instead.
if you're listening. That's for sure.
I would love to meet Zibby. She seems like a great time. And also just, she knows so much she reads so many books. I don't know how she does it, but the fact that she picked our book on this list, I don't even know. I have no words for how that even happened, but yay.
Most anticipated. So again, go out, get your pre-order. We're really here to make this a movement. Our goal is to get everyone to read this book so the world could be more dateable. So help us with that movement. Every book sale counts. Buy it for a friend, get audiobook. You can get multiple different types. We love it.
Yes. And if you have a book club, we're just doing a little, shout out to anybody who has book clubs or you're part of a book club and you want us to be involved with our book and your book club in whatever capacity, just reach out to us. You can email us hello@dateablepodcast.com or you can DM us on Instagram @dateablepodcast. We're very active on both. But if you have an idea of an event, we can zoom in, we can do a reading, we can do whatever it is. So let's discuss if you have a book club.
Let's discuss. Love it. @Dateable Podcast. Find us on Instagram and leave us that rating and review. It goes such a long way. Okay. Well, before we get into it, let's hear a message from our sponsors.
Do you ever feel like you want to enjoy the little things in life a little more? Really stop and savor the moment? Well, Via Gummies can really help with that. Slowing things down to be in the present. Trusted by over 250,000 customers, Via's hemp products are the Swiss Army knife of wellness. Need to chill out after a long day? There's a Via gummy for that. Dealing with anxiety or stress? There's a gummy for that. Want to set the mood in the bedroom? Oh yeah, there's a gummy for that because Via has developed a unique blend of pleasure-enhancing, libido-strengthening herbs and a medium dose of THC all into one mind-blowing gummy called High Love. Their best-selling High Love gummy is my go-to because it awakens my senses and increases blood flow, making me feel so present in the moment. So if you're over 21, head to viahemp.com and use the code DATEABLE to receive 15% off. That's VIIAHEMP.com and use the code DATEABLE at checkout. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Take your passion and pleasure to a whole new level with High Love from Via Hemp.
You may have heard me mention in our newsletter that I'm in the process of planning a trip to Italy, and I don't want to be that American tourist that doesn't know any Italian. What better way than to use Rosetta Stone, the most trusted learning program available on desktop or as an app that truly immerses you in the language you want to learn. Rosetta Stone is the trusted expert for 30 years and millions of users with 25 languages offered. The whole process just feels intuitive, like you're picking up the language naturally, first with words, then phrases, and then sentences. Their true accent feature even gives you feedback on your pronunciation, something I may even need sometimes in English. This is an absolute steal right now. With 50% off, your lifetime membership includes all 25 languages, so you have this for any and all trips you need in life. So don't put off learning that language. There's no better time than right now to get started. Dateable listeners get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off. Visit rosettastone.com rosettastone.com/today. That's 50% off unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Redeem your 50% off at rosettastone.com/today today. Okay, let's hear it from Todd Barrett's.
Hello. If I had $1 for every time a friend forwarded me one of your posts, Todd, I would be a fucking billionaire today.
Oh my God.
You are probably the most shared person in my friend circle.
Really?
Yes.
Like a million times.
That's so nice to hear.
And I mean, your whole message is about just getting realistic about relationships. I think that's why it resonates so much. I know I've definitely sent them to my partner being like, see, this is normal. This is totally standard, right? And like for you, it's like getting real, forgetting the fairy tale. That's your whole thing. Like, why do you think people's views on relationships are so misguided?
I wouldn't say they're misguided. I would just say they're really anxious. The values that we have, the way we approach relationships and dating is fueled by a lot of anxiety. And because of that, we will develop rules, have expectations, have wishes and desires that are just like science fiction, futuristic, unrealistic. I really do think it all comes down to anxiety. Where culture comes in is that it gives us permission to have this anxiety, and it describes this anxiety almost as health in terms of how we're told to look for a partner, to cultivate a relationship, what it should look like, what they should look like, who they should be, who we should be. All of these rules about what our relationships should look like as, again, anxiety. And so because of that, we're entering relationships with expectations about how we should be experiencing them. That is not how relationships work.
Well, what's so relatable about your content is that you are very realistic about relationships. And also you say the things that we've been all saying in our heads, but are too ashamed to say it out loud. Like, I remember you had a post about it's okay to seek external validation. It's okay to be really annoyed by your partner. All the things that we have in our...
Yeah, I hate them sometimes.
It's okay to hate your partner sometimes. But what is that balance? You know, how do we ride that line of being realistic, but also being hopeful in dating?
Well, how are you defining hope?
Hopeful in the sense that, yes, it's really realistic that there's this other side of relationships and dating, but how do you also know that it's a positive thing in your life? Like, how do people not give up on love if they're having this realistic perspective?
Well, you don't need to have fantasy of romance in order to participate in love or to have a wonderful love. The idea when I'm saying get real, forget the fairy tale, be realistic, stop fantasizing, all of that stuff, it has nothing to do with having a relationship that's not fun, that's not sexy, that's not wonderful.
Right.
That's not connected and full of love and wonderful times, also shitty times and conflict and managing differences and a decline in desire and challenge. But it's just to say that the reality of relationships includes the entire spectrum. And the idea that we should be hopeful is one that I encourage people to give up at the end of my book, the chapter Give Up Hope, in terms of giving up the hope that, you know, we can find the person, the relationship, the job, the body type, the body weight, the hair color, the bag, the home that's going to give us this kind of salvation where we won't struggle deeply, where we're not going to experience ongoing pain or loss or hurt or wounding, because that just doesn't exist. And again, that doesn't mean that in the context of those experiences where we do get wounded or experience pain, that there isn't intense joy and pleasure too. It's all of the things. It's more about accepting both the good, the bad, and in between than one or the other. But people want one or the other. People want black and white.
Yeah.
You know, it's either this or that. And how do I get this or how do I get that?
I think that's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's like when you meet someone, you're like, oh, dating's the hard part. I finally met someone.
Yeah.
Like, I can breathe now. And then, you know, the blinders come off at some point. There's some disagreement. I love what you say is anyone you love will disappoint you. You feel that disappointment. You thought that was reserved just for dating. And then you start to wonder, like, am I with the wrong person? I think that's the narrative we've been fed is like like relationships. That is the silver bullet at the end. Like, how would you respond to someone that's maybe questioning when that disappointment sets in?
I would say you're thinking about it all wrong. Because as you're describing, and as we all have probably thought at some point in our life, the question of, am I with the wrong person in response to disappointment, conflict, or some dynamic that we don't like? Now, that's not to say that the dynamic and the disappointment's irrelevant. But it's to say that the way that we are approaching relationships by only focusing on the other person or by only focusing on the here and now experiences, we're doing ourselves, our partners in our relationships, a disservice. We have to think about it differently. We have to think about our relationships as occurring in the context of our entire life journey. So if it's disappointment that we're responding to, what is our experience with disappointment? What is our partner doing to disappoint us? And how does that connect to how we learned to be disappointed by our mother, our father, our grandparent, or whoever raised us? Because oftentimes when we experience disappointment or conflict or we fight, it stirs up a lot of feelings. It triggers us. And it's unconscious for some of us, but most of the time there's a lot more meaning in terms of how we experience this disappointment or conflict than we realize because our focus is wrong. The focus is being on my partner did this to me and I don't like that. Yeah. It's my partner did this to me, I don't like that because it triggers this experience I had throughout childhood, or my parent didn't ask me questions and I felt invisible and I felt abandoned and they did abandon me and I was neglected. Yeah. So when my partner doesn't show up for me or hug me or ask me how my day was, it's obnoxious, yes, but it also triggers these earlier experiences that dysregulate me, stir up all of this emotion, and then I get passive aggressive or I get angry and I yell at them.
Right.
That's the focus. The focus has to be much more nuanced, much more broader, much more expansive.
Wow.
Because when we get into the they did this to me and it made me feel, that's reductive. It's blamey. You're not taking responsibility for the role and what you bring to that dynamic. Yeah. We want to expand. We want to create a story around these experiences if we truly want to participate in relationships and sustain them over a long period of time. Because they're not sustainable if you stay in the here and now. They're just not.
Right.
As you're saying that, all I can picture is someone with a ton of suitcases getting off a flight and their partner waiting for them. And they're like, I finally arrived and here's all my bags. Please take it all.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I feel like sometimes relationships are, is that we dump so much on our partners. We expect so much out of them and vice versa, to the point where we kind of get really overwhelmed and explode with all the baggage that we're all carrying. And you'd often talk about this idea of just looking for good enough. In a society where we try to maximize everything, we optimize the way we live our lives. We are also trying to optimize our partners. People are saying, isn't good enough settling. How would you counter that statement?
And I would say no. It's not settling. Good enough is good enough, is good. I think people often confuse good enough with settling, but I don't mean settling for a shitty relationship. I don't mean settling for an abusive partner for sure. I don't mean settling for something that's not good most of the time. But good enough allows room for disappointment. Good enough allows room for imperfection and all of the limitations that we all have. Myself, you, all our partners, every single human being on this planet. Because no one can show up for us all the time. No one can be our best friend all the time. No one can be our fuck buddy all the time. We have to allow a lot of space for disappointment and conflict and all the challenges that will arise. So if we're just constantly looking for the perfect person or the relationship that's the best relationship ever, we're going to be looking forever. It reminds me of looking for a home in New York City, a washer dryer, AC. There's literally, I could be looking forever.
Right.
But I have to find a place that I know that, okay, so the washer dryer's in the basement, it's not in the unit, I could be happy living here, but that would frustrate me a little bit. And the thing that I find most ironic is that, we've all learned to try, at least, to approach ourselves with that kind of perspective. And we would all agree that we would say we have to approach ourselves with self-love and think that we are good enough just as we are, right? So we give ourselves that courtesy. We allow ourselves to make mistakes and be limited and be imperfect and be annoying and struggle. But we do not give that same pass to our partners or our relationships. Right. We really have to understand that sense of being, I'm enough, that kind of experience has to also be with our partner. Right. Has to also be with our relationship. Right. That it can be enough. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it can be enough.
And just to clarify, we're not saying to be with the person that won't commit to you or the situationship or something toxic. This is more like
good enough.
Yeah, someone that's in it, but maybe they have a flaw or two. Maybe they're not perfect.
Maybe they have a flaw. Yeah. Yeah. And the way that I like to think about it is that the positive interactions outweigh the negative. That's really basically it. And that's good enough. You don't need 85% good times. We don't.
Right. I think the reality, too, is at the beginning, we tend to have, the honeymoon stage. Everything is going great. And then things start to unravel. We start to see the flaws come out, the annoyances. I love when you say, the end of the honeymoon stage is the start of the real relationship. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's a really big and scary experience, and it can be disappointing in and of itself. But what I mean by that is that the beginning of a relationship is usually pretty nice. There's low conflict, lots of sex, shouldn't be that difficult negotiating intimacy. You're still idealizing your partner. Emotional intimacy itself isn't as deep. So the little things they do aren't going to annoy you. And by that, I mean, you don't live with them likely. You're not spending every single day together with them. So there's still space and separateness. And then as emotional intimacy increases, as you start spending more time together, you start getting to know each other. You start getting to know those limitations. Those limitations start to annoy you. Those limitations and annoyances start to create a dynamic. And in that dynamic, the honeymoon ends and your relationship is basically starting. And by that, I mean, you know each other. Because at the beginning of a relationship, you don't really know each other. Even if you're spending a lot of time together, you don't know each other.
Right.
You don't know each other in terms of how you interact with your best friends or your family, or when something doesn't go your way, or on a trip when you miss your train, or all of those micro experiences deepen emotional intimacy. And so over time, you get to know each other. And it's in that space that you start forming loving feelings, and also resentments, annoyances, disappointments, conflicts, where that idealization is no longer. And you're like, oh, this is who I've chosen.
Right.
I can't believe it.
Right.
Cross turn. The reality sets in. And people often get really disappointed by it not lasting longer, by it whatever. But there's really nothing wrong with that. I mean, oftentimes that can mean many things. I mean, it can mean that the relationship won't work, but it could mean you just got to know each other really quickly. And there's a dynamic that's happened that's the traumas are competing with one another.
Right.
But so it's not a bad sign when the honeymoon ends. I think it's good. It's good.
It's real.
But like you said, it's a scary transition process because that's when things get real. That's when things really unfold. How do people strike the balance between being realistic that we are transitioning out of the honeymoon period versus, oh, this person is not right for me?
Yeah, I get asked this question regularly. When is it time? How do I know? What should I do? I don't know. Most people are really freaked out. Like I said, the way we approach relationships is through a lot of anxiety. eHarmony does these really great studies. They call them dating diaries. And a lot of the stats that they found is that most people who have experienced one breakup, so one experience of heartbreak, over 84% of them are going to bring that caution and that fear into their new relationships. Just one experience of heartbreak, one experience with loss. And so when the honeymoon ends, when we hit a wall at our partner, those cautionary tales from our last relationship, from the pain, from the burn, from the wounding comes up. I'm less concerned with the timing, the demographics, the when to leave, when to go. And again, more around shifting away from that evaluative lens and more on to creating a story of meaning. So what is it that you have found out about your partner? What is it that you found out about yourself? What is it that's missing? What are you doing to work on it? What have you done to work on it? Would you go to couples therapy? Would you take a course? All of those questions about what's happening, and to really create a story around that and to co-create the relationship around those two co-occurring stories. Because most people, what they're doing is, whether it's the end of the honeymoon or a horrible dynamic that just leaves them feeling shitty, is that they're not addressing it with their partner.
Right.
And if they are, they're doing it in the most unproductive of ways. That doesn't work. And then they keep doing it over and over. It doesn't work, but they just keep doing it. So if anything, all of this experience, the challenge, the end of the honeymoon, the conflict, all of it,
I like that.
It's an opportunity to wake up. It's an opportunity to learn something about yourself, to learn something about your partner and your relationship, regardless if it means you're going to be with them forever and ever and ever. But that's the thing, is that we're all freaked the fuck out that our relationships are going to end before they've ended. And so as a result, we become a partner that's not necessarily connected, that's not necessarily really working on the issues that are bringing up our fears in the first place. The main point I'm trying to make is to shift away from the evaluative lens of, what's the algebraic equation that equals my decision or what I should do, and more so on who am I, what's happening for me, what's my story, what's my partner's story? Let's talk about that. How can we work on this together? Blah, 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 blah. That's something really, it's a crucial skill to work on and to be able to do it. And what I'm talking about is curiosity and collaboration.
Yeah. You also, in your book, the central story was about you and your ex-partner of 10 years. So I'm sure you have a lot of experience of navigating this. And I remember reading it and you talking about how you just felt there was this feeling of emotional depth that was missing and communication. Knowing what you know now, how would you have approached this differently?
I don't know. I mean, I was going to dedicate a piece of my book to go back. I decided ultimately not to do that because who knows? I had a session earlier with a client that was trying to do that. And ultimately, there's really no way to know what would have worked differently. But as I'm entering a new relationship now, the same exact things are coming up for me, regardless of what my partner is or isn't doing. My same exact emotional responses and feelings and themes are coming up. And I'm not withdrawing, I'm not avoiding, I'm not planning my escape. I'm really doing my best to work through them mutually. Because what I did with my ex was I never really tried to work through them because I was so convinced he couldn't. I could have been right. I don't know. Every time I tried to bring something up, he really just didn't want to talk about it. I could have pushed, I don't know. But what I do know now is that the same things come up and I can't let myself avoid them. That's the biggest thing that I've learned. And if I were to go back and redo it, that's a huge thing that I would do.
I mean, it's fascinating that the same stuff is coming up. It just goes to your point earlier.
Fascinating is one word.
Fucking
really
frustrating.
fucking annoying. And what the hell? I thought I was over this shit is really the story.
Fascinating from our perspective, maybe not yours.
No, I know. It is interesting. It's, it's really humbling and interesting and meaningful. It's really meaningful in terms of how my trauma has impacted me. I know doing what I do that this isn't a me thing. This is, if you experience trauma, you'll probably have thematically similar issues in your intimate relationships.
It's just so easy to be like, well, I should just go to someone else. Like it'll all get resolved.
And the other shit comes up. This is the difference between thinking about something in theory and then putting it into practice. And now you have the opportunity to put it into practice with all these patterns repeated. And how you respond to these patterns is the progression that you've made. So I think it's validating for people to hear that the patterns still come up, even though you did all this work. But now it's like, how do you deal with it? And one thing you talk about quite a bit is we get so affected by our partners. They say something, we get pissed. They do something, we think we're highly, highly affected by the things that they do. But you often say, you have to hold your own space. You can't lose yourself, but also hold that space for your partner to say or do whatever they need to do. How are you able to do that now in this relationship? Like when these old patterns come up, how do you hold that space for your partner, but also know that there's a separation?
I could tell you what I would tell my clients, but the reality of that's really fucking hard. I call this mission impossible in my book. You can't do both. You just can't. You can't hold space for yourself and hold space for your partner. And this is also what I talk about in my book is in terms of differentiation, is that we have to connect with ourselves first and hold space for ourselves first. And that doesn't mean to neglect our partner or to dismiss them, invalidate them, or disconnect from them or withdraw from them. It just means to connect with, okay, this is what I'm feeling. This is what my story is. What's yours? As opposed to, well, what do you want? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Well, why do you think that? Why do you feel, to really connect first with yourself. So you can have two adults who are trying to connect from their authentic self, and being able to hold space for that is the challenge.
I want to dive into this even more, but before we do, let's take a quick break to hear from our partners. We're officially entering fall, and I don't know about you, but this is by far my favorite season. Between pumpkin spice lattes and sweater weather, it's the best. And Quince makes it easy to shift my wardrobe from summer to fall with high-quality items that don't blow my budget. I'm obsessed with the tan cashmere sweater I got from them. It's one of their signature items, and it's just so soft and luxurious. And $50. That's unheard of for cashmere. And the quality is to the same level of luxury brands that cost a heck lot more. All Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. And that's because Quince partners directly with top factories, cutting out the cost to the middleman and passes the savings on to us. Make switching season a breeze with Quince's high-quality closet essentials. Go to quince.com/dateable for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/dateable to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/dateable.
I love my shower time. See, I'm an evening showerer because I like to wash off the day before I hop into bed. And now with Osea's new Ondaria algae body wash, my shower routine has turned into a tropical paradise with its iconic all-natural uplifting citrusy scent. This body wash infuses your shower with the healing power of the sea, formulated with nourishing, nutrient-rich Ondaria seaweed, glycerin, and an oil blend. Also, its pH balance, hydrating formula doesn't strip skin, leaving it feeling soft and renewed. I'm personally a big fan of the gel-like texture. It just feels really nice in my hands, and it's beautiful, rich lather. And the all-natural citrusy scent that smells so vibrant. You just feel like you just went, I don't know, surfing? Even I don't surf at all. It leaves my skin feeling so wonderful and, can I just even say glamorous? Upgrade your shower with clean, vegan face and body care from Osea. Get 10% off your first order site-wide with code Dateable at OseaMalibu.com. You'll get free samples with every order and free shipping on orders over $60. Head to OSEAMalibu.com and use the code DATEABLE for 10% off.
Guys, when I found out that Artifact Uprising was going to be one of our sponsors, I lost my mind because I've literally done all my holiday shopping through them for the last couple of years, and the gifts are always a massive hit. Artifact Uprising is a Colorado-based company that sells premium quality, customizable photo goods for your digital photos. They want to help you preserve your meaningful moments this holiday season. Whether you want to say I love you with the perfect gift, display favorite memories in your home, or connect with loved ones throughout the year, they have a product you can personalize. I've gotten photo books, calendars, and scrapbooks, and they are always simply beautiful and always a hit because of how personalized they feel. Like I mentioned, I've gotten many gifts over the years, but I kind of wanted my own photo book about having that physical memento to put in your home. I decided to make a photo book of me and my partner's first year together, and we have just so many photos, but it was easy to go through them, and the book came out beautifully. And who knows, maybe one day we can share it with our future children to show them how young and crazy their parents once were. Artifact Uprising makes it easy to tell your story. Through the end of the year, Dateable listeners can give Artifact Uprising a try and get 20% off for new customers or 15% off if you purchased before. Just visit artifactuprising.com and use the code Dateable through December 31st.
What is something that's very triggering for you?
Let's say criticism.
Oh, yeah. I really...
Okay, so let's say your partner criticizes you.
I mean, all of this is a mindfuck. So, okay, so you get criticized, and then I could get upset, I could withdraw, I could disconnect. I could understand that the criticism isn't really about me, that maybe they're anxious, tired, or hungry. I could also say, I know myself. I know that, they can criticize me all they want. I know that this is, not a problem and that I'm not doing anything wrong, that it's bothering them for some reason and that that's okay. So I'm holding space for myself, saying, I know who I am. I know that this is not something that I've done that's terrible or wrong and that they're having a reaction to me and that that's okay. Similar to how we can say to ourselves, it's okay if we hate our partners. It's okay if our partner hates us. It's going to happen if we frustrate them, if we annoy them. And we have to be able to depersonalize that, which is so hard.
So hard.
And so often what it is it's a ping pong match inside my mind where I'm like, yeah, but he's doing it. But no, it's fine. There's a lot of back and forth. And depending on the day, sometimes, the ball will land in one or the other court. And I won't be able to manage and kind of hold myself together. And other days, I'll be able to simply laugh and just be like, you're on one today, aren't you? And, not personalize it and not fully care or spin and spiral about, well, what does this mean about who they are and the relationship and our relationship in 5 months and 6 years and this isn't going to work if we have a kid and,
Yeah.
Because that's where it can go.
That's where my head goes.
Yeah. And it's like years.
Yes.
Like not even there. And it's fear. It's lots of fear. So the best thing is to really just to do your best and have your best be enough to connect with the fear, to see how if that day, today, you're able to be in the present, be there for yourself and do what it is that you want, which is connect, because so often we get to these points where we're like mad at our partners for doing something. And the way we react, whether it's internally or externally, destroys connection.
Yes.
I'm really glad that you like normalize that, like sometimes what the textbook says or sometimes what you would say to clients, like sometimes doesn't always measure up in the moment, because I've been there before. Like, I'm like, oh, you know, we do this dating podcast. I've had this like episode of just elegant communication and how to use like I statements. And then sometimes when you're in the moment, I'm like, oh yeah, this did not come out that way at all.
Yeah.
So I think it's good though to normalize, because I think sometimes people, when they hear all this, like, oh, I have to like, you know, make sure I'm doing it by the book and, you know, following this method to like have a healthy relationship. And I love what you say of just like even tossing out this notion of healthy relationship and like all of these notions, that it's just like not always realistic at times.
And I would say this to a client. I wouldn't be like, you know, it's going to be easy. I'd be like, it's going to be really fucking hard. You're going to be really fucking annoyed.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You're not going to be able to do this all the time. I wouldn't sugarcoat it.
It's important.
It is.
Yep.
It's also just so real to accept that two realities can exist at once. You can both love someone and be frustrated by them. You can both have done all this work and still be triggered and have old relationship patterns show up. It's like two facts are happening at once, and sometimes they are kind of contradictory. Something that a quote that you've said that we've quoted in a previous episode is, no matter how many boxes someone checks, you always choose someone that in the end frustrates you. We all end up with our own unfinished business and create dynamics that result in a reenactment of our earlier stuff. Do you sometimes read your old shit and you're like, I should listen to that? Like, I should probably take my own
where, I
advice.
mean, I write it because it's in response to something I've done.
Yeah. And then, you said how hard it is to try to differentiate what's your own shit versus what's missing in that relationship. Any other frameworks that you can give our listeners of when something like this happens? Do you just take a pause and then step back? Like some other methodology for us?
Well, I mean, people are constantly trying to decide, is it me or is it my partner?
Yeah.
And, you know, for anyone listening, you can give yourself permission. You don't have to do that. You can stop, because the answer is it's both. It's both your partner and it's you. There's no one or the other. It's always both. If it was just you alone in a room, it would just be you.
True.
But if there's two people in the room, then there's two people in the room. And so it's really hard not to go and spiral and blame our partners for being the imperfect assholes that they can be. But what's more productive, like I was saying, is to be more curious about ourselves, to use that experience of whatever the bad is, the wound is, the insecurity is, to explore and to learn more about ourselves, because that's what we have access to directly, is ourselves. And that's what we have somewhat control over, is ourselves. We can't control our partners, no matter how much we want to, and we don't own them either. So the best thing that we can do in those situations are to say, okay, this is both them and me. What's my role? And then you share them, what your role, and then you say, well, what's your role? And you negotiate and you compromise and you discuss in a time-limited way. And then you have to drop it and move on. But it's always both. It's always both.
I think a lot of times people are like, well, I don't have this issue with anyone else in my life.
Right.
Like you've talked about this like a bit, like obviously you're just spending a lot more time with your partner. Like, is there anything else of why it comes out in romantic relationships where maybe like you don't feel the same way towards friendships or platonic situations?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I hear this line all the time. My ex used to say this to me. It used to drive me crazy. Because I'm like, of course you only have this problem with me. Of course we only have these problems with our intimate partners. They're the ones that we have the most emotional intimacy with.
Yeah.
We're quite literally sharing lives with a partner. We're expecting them to be everything to us these days. So we don't expect our friends to be our life companion, our fuck buddy, our dog walker, our sous chef, our everything. We expect them to be our friends. And if they cancel, we're like, what the fuck? But if our partner cancels, oh my God, it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
So the pressure and the expectations are higher. The emotional intimacy is deeper. The role is more centralized. And it's centralized in such a way that it directly mirrors and parallels our earlier attachment relationships. So our relationships with our adult partners, our intimate relationships, they're not attachment relationships, but they're a reenactment of earlier relationships. And so because of that, they're going to stir up our traumas. They're going to stir up absolutely everything. And so if a friend pisses us off versus a partner, it's going to be a very different experience. They mean more to us. they play a bigger role in our life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, a stranger versus a friend. If the stranger says, I don't like your shirt versus a friend, the friend is going to have more of an impact.
Right.
Because that's the person you think about every day, the person you interact with every day. Obviously, everything they do is going to have a lot more impact on you. And knowing that when you're in a relationship with someone, they have such an impact on you. Let's say you decide to leave that relationship. Do you have any thoughts around what is the best way to end a relationship?
Yes. Kindly, empathically, together, through sadness. So many people end relationships through anger. They blame, anger, labeling, mean, regret, all of this shit. And I see all of that as resistance, as a defense against the sadness, the loss. So the best way to end a relationship is with integrity, to honor the relationship for the shitty times, for the wonderful times, for the confusing times, to honor your partner for being limited and imperfect, but your partner nonetheless, to give yourself credit and softness and be more generous, to really approach the ending of a relationship with a lot of nuance. But so many people are doing it with just blaming and saying their partner was a piece of shit and how could they have done that? They made a big mistake. Never will I ever. Blocking this, that, never speaking to them ever again. There's a lot of animosity. And I think that's just a cover for a fear of loss. The scariest part of our lives is loss.
Yeah, definitely. And like you were saying earlier, like the animosity will carry to the next relationship I think we've talked about this a bit of like this common question of do I stay or do I go? But you offer up like a third option of giving it your all.
Yeah.
Why do you think this is like the best option to go for if you're in this position? And like, how do you actually make change happen in this option?
Well, it's really hard because it feels counterintuitive. If you're feeling one foot out the door, feeling like you should end your relationship, working on the relationship feels like, why would I do that if I want to end it?
Yeah.
But the reality is that so many people are saying, I want to end my relationship. I'm unhappy. One foot's out the door, but they're not ending their relationship.
Right.
So if you're not actually going to end your relationship, if you're just thinking about it, if you're unhappy and unsatisfied and miserable, but in it, then if you are not working on it, you're contributing to your own misery.
Yes.
And so most of us do think that there's really only these two options. I have to just stay in it and figure it out and make it work or leave. But the third option is you work really fucking hard. You do your best. You navigate whatever it is that's come up that's making you unhappy. You figure out what your role is. And you explore these conflicts together with your partner. The decision to end a relationship is a couple's issue.
Yeah.
And so you can work on that together, whether that's working on that together, ending it, or in creating a new relationship that feels more satisfying. But it's hard because most people, don't want to put effort into something they want to leave, even though they might be paralyzed and not leaving.
Yeah. What if you're ready to put in the effort, but your partner is resistant? How do you deal with that?
Well, everyone's resistant in one way or another. And so you can push, you can challenge, you can push and challenge more. I would say go to therapy. I mean, I honestly don't want to ever go through or be in a relationship without being in therapy. I don't want to do a relationship alone ever again. I think going to therapy, doing active work, reading books together, really, I don't want to say demanding, but I'm going to say demanding that work is done. And, that's another way that you can see if this is going to work. If you want to work on your relationship and your partner's like, well, I'm not working on it. I mean, there you go.
Yeah.
That's a problem. And so that's information for you. And that's why I encourage people to do the work as opposed to just kind of sitting going, I hate this. It sucks. I hate my partner. I hate my relationship and not doing anything about it.
Right.
So it's in the process of trying and putting work into it that will help you get to your decision as opposed to making pros and cons lists and just being unsatisfied and being unhappy and doing the same thing over and over again and just being unhappy, which is what most people do. But I would say therapy, books, online programs, some kind of collaborative experience that's work related.
I mean, I could hear people saying like, I don't want to push too hard. I don't want to make it worse. What would you say to them?
Yeah.
Or is this just,
I would
is this
say
all
why?
a sign? Yeah.
Why don't you want to push? Why don't you want to ask for more? And again, usually this is a story that goes far beyond a decline in satisfaction in a relationship.
So look deeper to your own stuff.
Yes, is kind of the answer to everything.
Just play it on repeat.
Yeah.
And along the same lines with Julie, Julie just asked, what happens in a relationship where one person is the more wounded one, who carries more trauma, who seemingly has more shit to work on.
Yeah.
And the other partner is there to support. Do you think that dynamic actually exists? And if
Yeah.
it does the healthier partner, like what is that person working on?
Quotes, healthier.
Yeah, healthier. Yeah.
All sorts of relationships exist and all sorts of dynamics. Relationships are so diverse, which is often why I take this neutral, nuanced approach and stay away from this kind of aspirational right way of whatevering relationships. But if one person is struggling more than the other, that's okay. That's like saying, what if one person has a physical illness and the other one doesn't?
Right.
It's no different. I'm not saying that mental health issues are the same as physical health issues. I'm not saying they're not. But what I am saying is that some kind of negotiation, agreement, and ongoing discussion and process and working together has to happen in terms of creating balance and creating and understanding what that balance looks like. Because relationships don't have to be 50-50 in order to be satisfying. People don't have to be in the same exact place with their mental or physical health in order for it to be satisfying either. But people do need to have an idea of what they want and be committed to also giving their partner what they want if they can.
When do you think it is time to go? Like outside of, someone that won't work on it or abusive or toxic situations, like what other reasons would you say are like grounds for throwing in the towel?
It's so individual and subjective. I mean, aside from that catastrophic stuff, I mean, if you're really unsatisfied and just really unhappy and you don't like your partner and you don't respect them, that's a really big problem.
So basically, if you're like, just don't respect them or there's no like redeeming qualities anymore.
Yeah. Like it's not salvageable.
I want to learn more about your current relationship. How did you two meet and how long have you been together?
Dating up 9 months, maybe more, November, however many months or so. It's still new.
What feels different in this relationship than previous ones?
Well, I'm talking about things a lot, and so is he. We're pretty open with each other with our internal worlds as things come up. So like with my ex, we never really processed any of our conflict and we were just kind of on autopilot, which actually worked for a period of time. I don't know if it's because I was younger or what, but it's much more open in terms of if we're having conflict or if we're annoyed with each other or if we're in a mood or whatever, it's much more transparent in that sense.
One of the things I'm picking up like from this conversation is just like there's always going to be, two things can be right at the same time. Like you can be happy in a new relationship and then also miss your ex or the past life that you had. Do you still feel that? Like I know at the end of your book, you kind of shared that you still like miss your ex Alex often. Like how are you feeling about that today?
I wouldn't say I miss him often. I think about him fondly.
Okay.
Maybe I wrote that at a time where I was. More the relationship and the idea, which I'm building with my current partner, but the idea of having a shared life with somebody. That's something that I am actively working on building with my partner, and something that I really enjoyed about my last relationship was having a house together, a dog together, future plans together, and the assumption that there was a future together. I mean, I think of him fondly. He's a wonderful person. I don't miss him.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
Right.
But it did take a really long time for me to not. As I write about in the book, because of specific contexts in my life with my family, with moving, with friends, I was pretty lonely and I was using him as a stand-in to hold on to. So then I missed him more.
Yeah.
That was more related to some complex issues that I was dealing with, which I'm not really anymore.
Do you still talk to him?
Not really. Like, we'll check in once in a while.
Does he know he's in your book?
Oh, yeah. I sent him a copy. And
you did?
He saw the manuscript before it was published.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if he's read it, but...
He better.
Like, it was sent to him.
It was sent.
I mean, I think one thing that's just overarching with relationships is like, I think when we talked about it here, it was like this anxiety overridden by anxiety. But there's also like this feeling of needing to control, I think.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to have pain happen. So you feel like you need to be in control. Like, how do you start to let go of that and take relationships more for what they are, like you were describing at the beginning?
I mean, it's really hard. I don't know anyone who isn't a control freak who doesn't want to control their partner or their environment in such a way that it won't touch on their wounds or their soft spots. Everyone wants to control that.
Yeah.
And then when someone does touch our soft spots, we want to control them for doing it and blame them and hope and expect that they won't do it again.
Yeah.
And then a week later, they do it again, and then we go through the whole thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The letting go of control thing is connected to what I was saying, the give up hope, which is, again, the last chapter of the book, in terms of giving up hope and giving up the need to try and safeguard ourselves from experiencing pain. I'm not saying, go touch a hot stove. But when it comes to our relationships, especially uncertainty and especially the triggers that come up, to accept them, to embrace them, just as we would a wonderful experience, and to let them happen, because they're coming. It's coming. We can't do anything to stop it. So the best thing we can do is to really honor what it is that comes up. If our wounds get stirred up, to know them, to know ourselves, to view it just as we would any other experience, to examine our relationship with pleasure and pain, to examine how we respond to pleasure and pain, and to develop a more philosophical connection to some of those experiences, rather than I need to control, to analyze, to solve, to fix, to treat, to cure. Because right now, that's where our relational cultural space is.
Yes.
It's aspirational around this kind of, identify red flags, treat them, and either cure them or move on. And
Very
if you don't move
binary.
on, then there's something wrong with you. And there's something wrong with your relationship. They're probably toxic. What's their problem? What's your problem? You have to leave. You should have left already. If that was real, I would love that. But that whole process is not, it's not a realistic way to think about things.
Yeah. Everyone's label is toxic these days.
Oh
right?
my God.
Everyone's in a toxic relationship with a toxic person.
Yeah, I posted about that today.
Did you? Yeah.
Everyone's fucking toxic.
I mean, there's so many takeaways of this whole conversation. I think the biggest one I'm having is kind of what you were just alluding to, of just everything in today's world is so black and white, of healthy or not healthy, good or bad, stay or go. And what I'm hearing from you is that there's just so much middle ground, because at the end of the day, we are humans, we are flawed. Like, everyone is not going to be perfect at all times. And all those expectations and the anxiety and the need for control, like, that's what's actually getting in our way, not our partners, ultimately not even our own stuff, if we can address it. And really, like, in a relationship, I think the reality that needs to set in for everyone is there's going to be good days and bad days, but do the good outweigh the bad? And then also, is your partner willing to work with you? For me personally, that's been like the biggest green flag I'll use for my relationship, is that, like, even if there's challenges, like, my partner will listen to that podcast, he will do the exercise, he will go to therapy. Like, that to me is like actually worth working on.
Yes.
If someone wasn't willing to do that, then I would look at it differently, instead of being like, well, sometimes this happens or sometimes that happens, or we trigger each other in certain ways. What I'm realizing is that I would be triggered by anyone. It's just like, how do you deal with it? And how do you find a partner that will work with you on everything so you can heal together, but then also, make ultimately a life that works for the two of you?
Totally. I couldn't have said it any better.
I'm just summarizing you.
100%.
Put that in your quotes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like my main takeaway is not looking at relationships from a evaluative lens. That was such a fucking light bulb that went down my head, because, I thought a lot of the times what we say is, oh, when your partner does something, take that as information. And how do you evaluate that? And what do you do with that information? But what you're actually saying is, don't put a filter on it. It's not a good or a bad. It happened, and it's making me feel this way, and get curious about, why is it making me feel this way? What's it bringing up for me in my space? I take care of myself first, and then I bring it back into the relationship of looking at more of a holistic lens. I love that, because outside of the extreme behaviors and actual abusive behavior, there really is no good or bad in a relationship. That's what I feel like. It is just is. Yeah. It is. This is something that's happening. And we just have to really understand how we process what is happening in a relationship. And having a partner who's willing to process with you is probably the biggest quality we should be looking for in a partner, outside of all the other shit that doesn't really fucking matter end of the day. I have one last question for you. Realistically speaking, even in the healthiest of relationships, like the Esther Perels and the Gottmans, do you think they have periods of seriously thinking about leaving their partner?
Oh, they themselves?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, totally.
You think so? Like, it's just normal, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like being in a bad mood. Rain.
Yeah.
Cloudy skies. Hurricanes, lightnings, and thunder. I mean, some days or moments can be a flash of hate and disgust. And then for some reason it just lifts.
Yeah.
We go to bed, we wake up the next morning and we're back in love or we're back committed or whatever. I do think it's part of the normal ebb and flow of rupture and repair in all relationships.
I mean, this is something I'm learning I have to work on, but like, I think for me, it's like easier to say that like when I'm the one at the forefront. But if I hear that, like that my partner's like questioning things or like has that fleeing, it like really goes to a deep wound. Yeah. And I'm realizing that this is not stuff from my relationship. It's stuff from a lot earlier on that needs to get dealt with.
For sure.
Yeah.
Always.
So if you could leave our listeners maybe with one more thought about love to keep them grounded, what would that be?
Be more curious about yourself and your partner.
I love that.
And then I guess the last question, the whole book title, How to Not Lose Your Mind. To you, what is like the way to stay grounded and not lose your mind in love?
Well, I don't mean to disappoint you, but the title is a bait and switch. You're going to lose your fucking mind. Accept it yesterday so you can tolerate your partner.
I love it. Love it.
I love how real you are. You're like probably the realest guest expert we've ever had on our show. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I love it. You will lose your mind.
You're going to lose it.
Todd, other than us stalking you on Instagram, what are some other ways that people can learn more about you?
You can find me on Instagram at Your Diag Nonsense, my podcast at Our Diag Nonsense, my website, toddasparrots.com. Again, I'm in-house rep for eHarmony, so you can find out information about eHarmony and me there. I have online courses, get my book, How to Love Somebody Without Losing Your Mind, audio, Kindle, multiple languages.
I love the book, and hopefully, everyone can get their hands on it because there's just so many more nuggets that we didn't even go into on this episode.
So listen, listeners, have you read the book? Have you followed Todd? What are some things that sparked for you in this episode? What is something you are becoming more grounded on? What is something that's more real for you? Why don't you share with us in your comments in a rating and review for both of our podcasts, for at Dateable Podcast and for at Our Diag Nonsense. Leave both of us a 5-star review and let us know what is something you learned from this episode that sparked an idea or sparked an action for you. We love to hear from you. And with that, thank you, Todd. And finally, you came to fruition and you lived up to all of our expectations of you. So
great.
Thank you so much for being on our show. Yay.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for supporting me. It was really wonderful to meet and see both of you.
Of course.
And we're going to wrap up this episode. Stay dateable.